Hi, I'm Dee Dee Caring, Executive Director of Finance and Operations at Wayzata Public Schools. I'm here to share some important updates regarding our district's current financial situation. Due to various factors such as declining enrollment due to the pandemic, state funding for education not keeping pace with inflation for decades, and additional inflationary pressures, we are facing some difficult challenges in the coming years. As a result, we must make some strategic cost containment decisions in order to maintain our financial stability and still provide the best possible education for our students. In this brief overview, I will share details about the cost containment process and provide information on how it will impact our district. Unfortunately, the state legislature won't conclude its work until late May. Regardless of the outcome of the legislative session, we expect there will be a remaining gap between revenues and our anticipated expenditures. Once state revenue is known, we may revisit the budget planning decisions being made now and determine if refinements are possible. While these changes may be difficult, I want to assure you that we are working hard to minimize the impact on our students and staff, and we remain committed to providing high-quality education for each and every student. Minnesota school districts are required to designate their expenditures and revenues into different funds. The first fund that I'm going to review is the general fund. It is the largest fund in a school district. This includes things for our district operations, including salaries and benefits, supplies, transportation, utilities, equipment, our long-term facility maintenance. These are all items used for educating our students. Fund 2 is food service, which is our Wayzata cafes. Again, that includes salaries and benefits for making meals. It includes the food and the supplies necessary to make those meals, and also equipment. The primary source of revenue for food service are the fees that students pay for meals. Community service is Fund 4. That covers things such as early childhood family education, adult basic education, our Wayzata Kids or Child Care program, youth classes, community education classes. Again, the primary revenue comes from fees. Fund 6 is our construction account. Those are used for major building projects. The revenue for this particular category comes from the sale of bonds. So when the district sells bonds to build, for instance, a new school, the revenue goes in here and the expenses are recorded in here as well. The last one is our debt service, which is Fund 7. That is to account for the principal and interest payments on our bonds. Think of this similar to your own home mortgage, where you make payments yearly on your bond or your mortgage for principal and interest. The important thing to remember on all of these is that Funds 2 through 7 are very specific and can be used only for those categories. You cannot transfer money from, say, debt service into the general fund. Similar with food service and community education. On the flip side, the general fund may support some of those other funds if they are in a deficit. For instance, food service may show a negative, which it did in 2021 due to the pandemic. The district does need to provide some additional funding. The general fund has various revenue sources. The largest portion of this is from state aid at 59%. This comes through our state aid general education funding formula, as well as state aid for our special education programs. The property tax, 35% of our budget, comes from our local property taxpayers. This includes our operating referenda and part of our capital project referendum or tech levy. The federal at 3% and other at 3% as well. The general fund expenses for 22-23, 72% of that is spent on employees. 16% in purchase services, which includes our transportation costs and other contracted services. Capital purchases, supplies, and other expenses make up the remainder of the budget. When looking at the district's spending, 77.5 cents of every dollar goes towards supporting students. Operational and fixed costs are 16.4 cents. district and school administration at 2.8 cents, and district support, which includes finance, HR, communications, at 3.3 cents. Instructional support includes assistant principals, general instruction support, curriculum, media, and instructional technology. Pupil support includes counseling, guidance, school security, health services, social workers, and transportation. Again, the largest part of the district's general fund budget is spent on student support. The unassigned fund balance is determined by the revenue and expenses that are not either designated, restricted, or assigned for other purposes. The unassigned fund balance is the best indicator of the district's financial stability. The school board policy requires that the district has a 5 to 7% fund balance with the goal to stay above 7%. As you can see in this slide, the unassigned fund balance has changed over this 10-year period. The highest percent of 11.4% in 2019-20 was due to an increase in student population, some required changes in accounting procedures, and unanticipated revenue. In the current school year, the unassigned fund balance is projected to be approximately 7.35%. Next, we'll look at the fiscal 23-24 next school year budget and the financial forecast. When developing a budget, the district must use assumptions based on current information, historical data, and estimated future costs. This slide displays our assumptions for the next 4 school years. The enrollment figures used were based on the demographic study prepared by demographer Hazel Reinhardt. The enrollment projection takes into consideration the birth rates, current census, housing developments, and migration of students in and out of our district. On the revenue side, we are projecting a 2% increase in state aid for fiscal year 23-24 and fiscal year 24-25, and then a 1% in the 3rd and 4th years. While many proposals for increases to the state aid formula have been made by the governor and the legislature, a 2% assumption is the percent the district has received for the number of years. While attempting to use a higher percentage, we need to be conservative in our projections to assure we have a balanced budget should the legislature decide to use the surplus for other programs. The other revenue percents are based on historic or known future rates such as our tax levy. For expenses, salary inflation rates are either per the current employee contract or set by parameters by the school board. The remaining expenses are based on previous trends or estimates given current inflation rates. With the parameters set in the previous slide, the district developed a 5-year projection starting with our current school year. The chart includes the enrollment, the state aid funding formula increase, as well as using the other percents indicated in the last slide, for a total revenue on the 3rd line. Next, we use the percent increases I shared on the last slide for expenses to arrive at the total expenses. The next line displays the change in fund balance, which is revenue less expenses. As you can see, in every year, the district's expenses exceed the revenue and decreases the district's fund balance. This is largely due to the fact that the percent increase on revenue does not keep up with inflation on expenses. The net effect of this decrease on the ending fund balance. The board has a goal to keep the fund balance at 7% or more. As you can see, we achieved this in the current school year, but we will not for the 4 subsequent years. Using this chart as our base for balancing our budget is the reasons we have to contain costs. So one might ask, how did we get here? A number of funding challenges has been caused by the pandemic, including decreased in student enrollment. The need to maintain the district's general fund balance at a minimum of 7%, an amount consistent with the required amount in the school board policy, and state aid funding for education has not kept pace with inflation for several decades, in addition to unfunded mandates along with pressure to school districts' budgets. We are reliant on the state's general and special education funding formula for general expenses, special education services, and other educational expenses funded by various categorical funding grants and school district voter-approved levy. The district developed a cost containment committee to balance the budget. As you can see in this slide, we have a mix of individuals representing from all over the district. This team had several meetings to review the cost containment ideas developed through the district's leadership council. The cost containment ideas will be up for consideration for more than the next school year. This will provide financial relief in future years. This page is a summary of the 2-year proposed cost containment figures by category. While the district has little opportunity to increase revenue on its own, we have included a few items that would bring in some additional revenue. This includes adding open enrollment for grades 9 and 10 at the high school. The revenue listed here is net of the additional staff that would be required to provide instruction to these new students. Part of the plan, which you will see in the upcoming slide, is to increase the walk zone, and here we list the transportation fee for those families wanting a different option. In fiscal year 24-25, we would increase athletic and activity fees as well as parking fees. As far as the expenses, you will see $1.2 million in reduced administration and support in 23-24, and just under $300,000 in fiscal year 24-25. Changes in the staffing ratio will produce $3.16 million in cost savings. We will look to explore scheduling efficiencies in both years with $410,000 in year 1 and $2.3 million in year 2. Reducing programs K-12 will produce $469,000 over the 2-year period. We would look to reduce transportation by $665,000 in the first year, which is due to increasing the walk zone to 2 miles. The district is positioned to shift some telecommunications to the tech levy for $250,000. Finally, the district has plans for some additional miscellaneous items for a total of $118,000 in year 1. The total cost containment of expenditures and revenue generation of $6.6 million in 2023-24 and $2.8 million in 24-25. Now we will look at the details related to the last slide. You will see that we have broken it down within different areas of the district. This first slide is district administration. This totals $1.04 million in year 1 and $79,000 in year 2. And you can see that all district level departments will be making reductions. Next, we'll look at the schools. In elementary schools, the cost containment will be approximately $2.1 million in year 1 and $220,000 in year 2. Middle schools will see a reduction of just under $1 million in 2023 and $1.2 million in 24-25. The high school will have a reduction of $1.3 million in year 1 and $1.2 million in year 2. You can see the details behind these that were described in the previous slide. Finally, you can see the cost containment as it relates to transportation, with increases in the walk zone to 2 miles, eliminating the middle school after-school routes, and some other cost-saving measures for a total of $685,000 in year 1 and an additional $40,000 in year 2. Finally, the recap of the revenue remains as it was in the previous slide. This table displays how the cost containment figures added to that base that we've looked at earlier will affect the budget for the next 2 years. While years 3 and 4 of the plan are under the 7% required by the school board policy, the district will monitor and review these projections annually. Thank you for listening to this presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me either via my email or phone number.